So it's been a long time since I've had the pleasure of welcoming scouts to share in worship. So I did a little bit of research. I talked to some of our scouting leaders about what guides the scouting movement. I quickly learned that the scouting community, like communities of faith, are bound together by promises. We just made promises to Grace and her family. Her parents promised to raise her in the church, and we promised to be her extended family, to support her and to help her to grow in faith as Sunday school teachers and youth leaders, maybe as band directors someday. Like the Christian faith community, scouting also revolves around promises. Any of the Girl Scouts in the house know the Girl Scout promise. I will do my best to be honest and fair, friendly and helpful, considerate and caring, courageous and strong, and responsible for what I say and do, to respect myself and others, respect authority, use resources wisely, make the world a better place, and be a sister to every Girl Scout. That's what y'all have to memorize? Now I know why I didn't last long in brownies. That's a lot. The Boy Scouts are a little more concise. To my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. The motto, which guides the entire scouting movement, can be summed up in 2 words: be prepared. Over the last 2 decades, I have grown particularly grateful for this scouting motto, be prepared, and that it teaches young people to plan in advance for the adventures the day will bring, to make sure they pack well. I've never been to Boy Scout camp, but at church camp, it's most often the scouts who have a Band-Aid just when you need one. It's usually the scouts in our group who can pull out a flashlight as the sun sets and we journey home from Campfire Hill. Since we're making plugs this morning, I will point out that summer camp registration for 6th through 12th graders is open. I'd love to have all of you at Campfire Hill this summer. Scouts are prepared by planning ahead and packing well, but more so, they're prepared in their learning. They learn and develop as many skills as possible. Here at Wesley, our scouts have been working on a cooking badge. I was delighted to hear that to get the badge, you have to start at the very beginning, where every adult knows the hardest part lies. They have to figure out what's for dinner. That's the hardest part. Then they have to grocery shop for it. Then they have to cook the meal and share the meal. Scouts focus on really practical lessons. This is obviously the case from the pictures they sent me of their recent lessons, one of which included how to handle a crocodile. So I'm glad that they know that, just in case we need to do that here sometime soon. A Girl Scout named Linda Pishin shared in a local scouting magazine that her troop has been studying mealworms and how they can be a critical source of protein in times and places of hunger. You go, girl. Eat that mealworm. Survive, right? Scouts don't just study, they practice their skills until they are mastered, and they practice their commitment to the community. One group of scouts has been practicing their fishing, hoping to be able to provide food for their community. Another group of scouts, some who worship here, practice serving by placing wreaths on hundreds of graves, honoring the veterans at Christmas time. Perhaps one of the greatest ways that our scouts are prepared is through opportunities to work together. Any of you eaten a Girl Scout cookie? I'm feeling like there should be a lot of hands up. Do you know that Girl Scout cookies were first prepared in private kitchens? All the girls in the troops were instructed to make cookies at home, and then to bring together all of their cookies, put them into batches, and sell them in their neighborhoods to benefit ministry, mission, and shared projects. Cookie making began in 1917, over 200 years of Girl Scout cookies. It was decades later when a writer in the American Girl magazine, Florence Neal, a Chicago director, provided a uniform recipe so that all the sugar cookies in the country would have a similar taste. The girls were instructed to make batches of 7 dozen cookies out of 26 cents in raw materials. That's pretty good. And they could sell each dozen at that time for 35 cents. Inflation. I know our boxes of cookies will cost a little more than that this year. But Girl Scouts have not only worked together to bake cookies. Scouts have been applying their teamwork to transform society for decades. Did you know that in the 1950s, the National Girl Scout Association began efforts to integrate their body by race, creed, and color? In 1956, Murray Walls was able to desegregate Girl Scout camps in Kentucky. Did you hear that date? In 1956, Girl Scouts were desegregated in Kentucky. That year, Martin Luther King Jr. called Girl Scouts a force for desegregation. So often is our young people that lead us in the right ways. Recently, after a typhoon devastated parts of the Philippines, local scouts came together and worked in unison, organizing relief efforts, distributing food and water, and helping to rebuild their neighbors' homes. One patrol even created an emergency response plan to help their neighbors navigate future emergencies with less loss of life. As we seek to work together in the church to create a better world and society, so our scouts work together alongside us. One of the most valuable, I believe, in our time, ways that scouts train to be prepared is by practicing resilience. And it's not just the scouts. I witness our young people preparing for life, practicing resilience through your athletics, through your academic efforts, through scouting, through 4-H, and some of you by beginning to hold a job. In the United States, a scout named Alex recently hiked the Appalachian Trail, a grueling 2,190-mile journey from Georgia to Maine, inspiring other young people to dream big and push beyond your limits. So what is the intersection between all of this preparation that is the hallmark of scouting and the scriptures which we gather around today? Well, let's go back to that gospel lesson. Jesus and his disciples were at the sea working on their sailing badge and learning to sleep and rest outdoors, when they noticed a big crowd had gathered at the seashore, and Jesus, moved by compassion, came to the land and began to heal the sick among them. When it was evening, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "This is a deserted place. The hour is late. Send the people away so they can go to the villages and buy food for themselves." The disciples were concerned that they were not prepared. Would you be prepared to feed a crowd of 10 to 20,000 people on a minute's notice? The disciples realize they are not prepared, and so they suggest that they should send the people away walking a distance likely from here to Westminster to get their next meal. Are y'all prepared? Did you wear the right shoes? Do you have enough layers to walk to Westminster for dinner? Jesus understood the predicament that they shared, and he said, "The crowds do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. And they, as any of us would, replied, Jesus, we have nothing here. They did a little inventory. They realized there was only one in the crowd who had come prepared, and that one had only brought 5 little loaves of bread and 2 fish. The disciples felt unmatched by the incredible need in the humanity around them. Have you felt unmatched in recent days by the magnitude of need, hunger and homelessness? Right? The cries for justice, the need for peace. We can understand how unprepared the disciples felt to rise to what seems an impossible task of feeding all the people, meeting this incredible need in their neighborhood. Jesus saw that one was prepared. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, you know, if you go on a day trip, bring enough food for supper. At least one of them did. And because one came prepared, Jesus had something to work with. Jesus said, just bring what you have to me. He didn't chastise them for being underprepared, but he said, just bring what you have prepared here to me. Friends, if we want to be a part of what the Lord is doing in the world, we must be prepared on both levels. First, prepared in our packing. What might the day ahead bring, and how can I be ready for it? What lessons do I need to learn to be useful? But we must also be prepared to trust the Lord with what we do have. What is already in you is relevant and important in meeting the needs of those around us. And as we are prepared to trust Jesus with what we do have, we can witness the miracles. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, Jesus looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves, and he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples shared them with the crowd. We get to be a part of the miracle when we come to life prepared to give what we have to Jesus, and then prepared to share everything the Lord gives us with our neighbors. The disciples could have said, oh good, the Lord multiplied the loaves and the fishes, so now there's enough for the 12 of us. But they didn't. They took the basketfuls and they went out into the crowd, trusting that as they shared what the Lord provided, there would somehow be enough. And all ate and were filled, and they took back the leftovers, 12 basketfuls. What an honor. What a thrill. What a holy privilege to have been the one who shared their lunch. To see what Jesus could do. What a holy privilege to be one who carried one of those baskets and realized it was more full when you came back than when you started. But we might wonder how. How on earth does a miracle such as this transpire? Annabelle, in her wisdom, she got us started. She said, a miracle is when God does something that our natural world does not allow. That's right. Annabelle will be preaching for you, just a matter of time. She's just warming up through the children's messages. I'm going to declare it, Annabelle. I see it. I don't know if it'll be from the pulpit, but from somewhere, Annabelle will be preaching. It's some of what God is preparing you for, perhaps. And hopefully more of you, young people. You know what the greatest need in the church is in your generation? Leaders. Some of you might be preachers someday, or lay leaders or trustees. Emily's shaking her head. It's a global reality, right? Food is one thing. Leaders, that's a lot of preparing. It's a lot of preparing. So we might wonder, how on earth will there be enough? How did Jesus take what is naturally impossible and make it an abundant feast for thousands? Well, perhaps it's just what Jesus can do. We know that anything is possible for our God, so maybe as they broke each piece of bread and gave it to the neighbor, the basket was replenished. Can you imagine how fun that would be if you were the usher, and you're handing out bread and every time you look down, there's just more? How tremendous. But I like to think that it's equally possible, or maybe a combination of the two, that because one person brought everything they had to eat, all of their loaves and all of their fishes, and they handed it to Jesus, when the crowd saw what that one was willing to do, as they saw the basket start to be passed and realized that the gifts of one would not feed the many, I like to imagine that all the people in the crowd started opening their go bags. And that bread that they had kind of tucked in way down at the bottom that they were saving for when their belly growled, they pulled it out and they put it in the basket. And those fish that were starting to, it's just gross that they used to just carry fish around, right? Just everywhere. But those fish that they were holding back, they pulled them out and they put them in the basket. And as the basket was passed, some received and some contributed. And somehow, inspired by the gift of one, as the community came together, there was enough to feed a multitude with leftovers to come back to the disciples to eat. I think either is equally miraculous. That Jesus could defy the laws of nature and substance, that the Holy Spirit could move through a gathered people and cause those who had a long journey home to offer the food that they had brought to their neighbors, to their community of faith. Be prepared, church. Be prepared to be amazed at what God can do through your preparation. That young lady, Linda Pishin, that was so fascinated by those mealworms, she studied about the impacts of hunger on her neighborhood and on her world. Together with her troop leaders and her friends, they formed a nonprofit that has gone viral, teaching communities how to develop, hear it, mealworm farms. Girls, is that what you want to do with your life? But think about it. If you could reproduce something that could feed thousands of hungry people, I might even cozy up to bugs if it was possible to do that. Anything is possible, and we can prepare to be amazed at what God can do as we place ourselves in God's hands. And so, church, my encouragement for us, the encouragement from the Gospels and from the Scout leaders, is to actively prepare for each day. Don't just mosey about. Prepare for the adventure ahead. In the winter storms that have recently hit, there was one Boy Scout who heard on the news how to make a winter pack for your car. And he put it together, water bottles and food and blankets and extra gloves. And when his family got stuck in a snow berm, he was able to pull out his pack and provide for his family until they were rescued. Be prepared. Be prepared to care for yourself and for your neighbors when you get ready in the morning. Be eager to learn and learn from all of life. We're never too young or too old to learn something purposeful. In Australia, a 12-year-old scout set about to learn how to swim. And after getting the swimming merit badge, he got the CPR merit badge, and then he got the life-saving merit badge. And then, at a family picnic, he watched a cousin get swept away in the river, and he had learned how to save his cousin. When God moves you to want to learn something new, God is preparing you for the next place where you are going to be useful. So learn. And be prepared to give all that you're learning, all that you have, all that you've prepared to God for the service of your neighbor. One of the most wonderful things the scouts in our community do is scouting for food. This year, our scouts worked together collecting over 30,000 pounds of groceries, many of which were distributed at South Carroll Food Pantry. Be prepared. Be purposeful and offer to God and neighbor the very best of yourselves. But lastly, be prepared to realize that all of your preparation will never be enough. You will always need God to multiply what you have, to amplify what you know, to forgive what you get wrong, to reconcile what is broken apart. We will always need God to be in the midst of us as we seek to love our neighbors, if we have any prayer to be enough. You will always need God, and you will always need your neighbor. None of us can go it alone. If there will be enough bread for any and all of us to eat, we better learn to share it. As we serve a neighbor, so a neighbor will be ready to serve us. Thanks be to God.